Welcome to FutureX, the podcast where we look to solve the variable that is the future of Web3. Every week, we'll talk with some of the brightest minds in the blockchain and Web3 space, from top investors to founders and builders, paving the way for a decentralized world. So what is the future of blockchain? What will Web3 look like in 2050? Let's explore together.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of FutureX. Today, we're extremely happy to have Bryan from LayerZero joining us. Bryan used to be the world's best poker player and is now running the world's, one of the world's best cross-chain projects. And by the way, this is Matt from SynFutures. But today, let's have the spotlight on Bryan. Now, Bryan, can you give us a quick intro about yourself, about LayerZero?
Hi, yeah. Thanks so much, Matt. Thanks so much for having me. Bryan, one of 3 founders and CEO of LayerZero Labs. LayerZero is pure generic messaging. So the way that I frame it to myself, more and more these days actually, is when you think about a packet on the internet, you've got a computer on one side, a computer on the other, and some payload, some piece of data. So 2 pieces of compute and a piece of data. When I think about LayerZero, it's really the same thing, but with contracts. It's arbitrary contract invocation with a bytes array. So the primitive for a packet on the internet is incredibly small, but obviously we're recording this because of that, and everything that we have today on the internet and are so used to is because of that simple piece. And so on the LayerZero side, it's really meant to be the same thing. That same sort of state of this arbitrary compute of smart contracts plus a payload, you can do so many interesting things on top of that. And I think that's really what we're trying to unlock, is just the ability for this seamless communication between contracts, between chains.
Thanks, Bryan. Personally, I'm pretty curious about the poker part because I always wanted to be a poker player. Can you let us know a little bit? What is your a personal shift from the poker player to now co-founder of LayerZero?
Yeah, sure. So my background is a little bit atypical, I'd say. I grew up in a town of 900 people, right? So like a little village in rural New Hampshire, as rural as it gets. I got a computer early, mostly just played video games on it, was very obsessive with video games. And I had a father who was very athletic and a brother who was 4 years older than me. So I was just always trying to chase them to try to get good enough to play sports with them and play games with them. Got into computer science very, very early, probably 13, started programming, went to school for computer science, and then ended up dropping out after 3 years to play poker professionally. Played poker for 8 years full-time, did 80 countries in those 8 years, so played all over the world, played the highest stakes you could possibly play. And then in 2011, online poker got banned in the US. So I was just all of a sudden, from one day to another, there were DOJ symbols on all of the websites, and all of our, all the money was locked up in the accounts, and I didn't have a job anymore. So I had to figure out kind of what I was going to do with my life. And it's kind of interesting because back then, 2011, every poker player got exposed to Bitcoin in 2011. So very, very, very early. And the reason is that we had all these payment processors of money bookers, NetTeller, Skrill, PayPal. And when UIEGA passed in 2011, they all stopped servicing the poker site. So all the kind of shady poker sites that stayed around, they started taking Bitcoin as a way to deposit. And so everybody used Bitcoin as a way to get from one site to the other. So most didn't hold it back then, but everybody got exposed, and then more and more people got in the space. So you'll see just endless numbers of poker players in crypto in general. But so I left in 2011. I started a company with my 2 co-founders again, actually. Ended up getting acquired 2 years later. Wrote some machine learning models that ended up getting shown to Billy Beane, of all people, and being sold to some of the professional baseball teams. Started a company in the Valley with first engineer out of Andreessen Horowitz, a couple of guys at Google, that company got acquired. And then I did some academic research for a year. I actually worked on AI, game theory AI, basically, and counterfactual regret minimization, published that with Facebook AI research, and then doing this now. I've been, more or less really started in crypto in 2013, really had a garage full of miners mining Bitcoin, and I was there for the Ethereum ICO and all of that. But more or less full time since end of 2016.
Wow. 2013 was also the first year I bought my first Bitcoin, I remember. But I couldn't hold it long enough.
It was a fun and interesting year, the 2013, 2014 timeframe.
And recently we've seen like so many people from like the gaming industry or from the internet industry coming into the Web3 world, right? Coming into blockchain. Is there any pieces of advice you could potentially offer for these newcomer who want to break their way into the industry? As you have done various different things in the past. Yeah, and any advices?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing always, and so like this was how we built LayerZero too. People ask a lot about it. Like I think the best thing you can do is just genuinely be interested. Like all the people who get totally wrecked in the space are people who like don't love or are interested in any aspect of it, but feel too much compulsion or FOMO or opportunity, right? Everybody's getting super rich, or all these things that are happening in 2017 and 2021, and you feel like you have to do it. And so people come in and then everything drops for a bit, and then those people like, why did I do this? They leave and they never come back. And so like for us, even when we started LayerZero, we weren't even trying to make a company, right? We were building something strictly for ourselves. Like it took a long time, probably 4 to 6 months of us building before we even decided to take on any external money or really formalize it. For us, it was a problem that we were obsessed with and we just like wanted to solve. And before that, we played around with everything. I've always played with everything in the space. I think the best thing you can possibly do is just like build stuff, launch stuff, play around with everything in the space. Like find something that's a problem you can't look away from, or you just feel like you have to put out in the world, or something that just like, why is nobody fixing this? I'm just going to do it myself. I think that's like by far the way to make the best companies, because if you do it for any other reason, it's just like impossible to have conviction during the hard times. But if you're building something just for yourself, like it doesn't matter if it's good times or bad times, like you're willing that thing into existence.
That's especially critical these days, right? We've seen like the people with real passion that's building things for themselves, from the bottom of their heart, they really want to solve this issue, that they stay in this market and survive through cycles, while like you said, other like FOMO minded players coming into this world, they're probably already out, if not in the next 6 months.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Bryan. Now let's move to the second part. Let's know a little bit more about LayerZero. We were probably, I think the community is well aware of the basic functions of LayerZeros, but I would say they are very curious to understand what are some of the use cases that are already available today, and what are some of the use cases that you think will have big potential in the future.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two verticals within on-chain stuff, right? There's like DeFi, and then there's NFT and gaming right now, and I guess there's like governance as well, which I guess will skew towards DeFi. But like those are really like the areas of interest. And so like in DeFi, what exists today? The ability to bridge assets, right? And so you can do this in like Stargate, where it's 100% native assets, or you can do it like a wrapped synthetic bridge, so like the Aptos bridge you made, which is like lock here and mint kind of an IOU synthetic asset over there. So both of those are totally viable and have been built, kind of applications that built these on top of LayerZero. You have DEXs, so things like Sushi Swap, Pancake Swap, etc. Some of the biggest DEXs integrating like, hey, actually the experience sucks when you need to like swap, leave, find some external bridge over, and then like hopefully make it back to us. So they want to just own that whole experience of just like, you have asset A on chain X, you want to go to asset B on chain Y, fine, do it in one single transaction. Yield farming is the next, which is like in an atomic setting is very easy. You unstake 10,000 here and you just like stake it over there. But in a non-atomic setting, so across chains, you have this kind of quandary of like, I've unstaked 10,000 here and I want to stake it there, but I don't have inventory, right? My inventory is stuck back on chain A. And so the ability to do that, so now you have wallets and sort of aggregators. So you can basically say, listen, the end user experience, what happens in the background is unstake, add to Stargate, subtract from Stargate, and stake. But the user just clicks one single transaction and that whole flow gets executed. Magically, in their eyes, they're now farming away on the other chain. So with like all that we've seen on the DeFi side of things, what is still to be done on DeFi or still interesting are a bunch of different things. I think money markets are definitely massive opportunity of just like really lessen the need for wrapped assets. And just like you want to collateralize your ETH position on Ethereum and borrow against it on like Sol, right? You don't necessarily need like wrapped ETH on Solana or wrapped Sol on like Phantom. What you want is like collateralize your Solana and like borrow USDC on Phantom or borrow Phantom on Phantom or whatever, right? So like that ability to have kind of money markets and debt tracked debt and credit across chains is super interesting. I think that is going to be a huge thing over the next year or so. Governance is definitely another like very big, very top of mind for lots of groups. I think optimistic execution when it comes to trading is super interesting. Like there's a whole host of things. And I always like to say, like, listen, I've been around a long time. Like I played with CryptoKitties when they very first came out. I have a bunch of Gen Zero kitties sitting in a dead wallet that I lost a long time ago. Like I was there for that. I never saw the NFT wave coming. I was farming yams like the day that yams released at the 300 million% APY and all this crazy stuff that was happening. And I never saw like DeFi summer coming. So I don't try to think that I'm going to be able to predict everything sort of that gets built. It's more build the base primitive and enable people to do all of this cool stuff. On the gaming and NFT side, I think it's a whole bunch of different things. We've seen so many cool things on the gaming and NFT side, and I think people are just being super creative. So it's going to be really interesting to see over the next year or so.
And I remember we used to, we talked something about cross-chain trading use cases, potentially, SynFutures can partner together with LayerZero as well, right? So,
100%.
We really look forward to that. And now, we had some chats earlier, like last week, and we understood that, there was 72 hours. It was after the collapse of FTX. You guys successfully managed this one, yeah. And I think it will be written in the textbook, yeah, on how to manage a potential, I wouldn't say a crisis situation, but like a situation, yeah, for a project, yeah. And we've all read the statement, but the community will be extremely interested to actually learn about the journey, yeah, what happened, what was the decision, how you managed this, yeah. Look, it's amazing. It's amazing how you guys manage this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I think the big thing is, in any time, like even in a generic case, when there's something happening, there's this trade-off between kind of time and perfection. And I think a lot of people misconstrue that in sort of how to deal with time-sensitive situations. And I think sometimes people overweight certain elements, whether it's leverage, whether it's prices, all of these different things that they might. And I think the most important thing by far in those situations is as somebody who's lived through all of poker and all of its blowups and all the crypto blowups and everything else, like time matters more than anything else. Nothing else matters but getting it done as fast as humanly possible. And like that trumps everything else. And so for me, what that looked like was just, I knew everybody was going to almost be impossible to reach, right? It was like very hard to get in touch with anybody. And when you did, you had 2 minutes at a time. There was no way to do, like you weren't going to be able to get into long conversations. You weren't going to do anything. I pinged them every 30 minutes for like 72 hours straight. Every single time, anytime they're online, anytime I'd seen them recently, just constantly. And it was like, here's everything. Here are the docs. Doc is in your DocuSign. Like, here's exactly what it is. Like, do this. And then, that basically was just like, time is of the essence. And I think like that is the biggest thing, is especially in a moment of sort of like crisis management or trying to figure out like how to get something done in a time sensitive thing. You just like all other priorities become lesser. And I think that is really the biggest thing. And I think like a lot, I've had hundreds of people reach out to me, literally hundreds after like 7 days after, and say like, hey, can I do this now? Can you do it? And I think people like really just totally misvalue how important it is to just act immediately in those kind of scenarios. I think that's like the best thing I can say about it is you just have to be as there is no higher priority.
I think also part of that must be the good muscle memories you have, right? Playing on the poker tape, yeah.
Yeah, too many crises, too many blow-ups lifetime. So yeah.
Super nice. And we also know you have 7 years of runway. SynFutures, we're in similar situation. We have a couple of years runway, pretty nice. And we're curious to know, like, with that amount of money, what's your treasury management, practice? I know you probably don't do it yourself, but the thing is, it's getting so hot, this topic recently, with many people mismanaging their treasury. Yeah, we want to know what's the practice from a professional poker player.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if the last little bit has taught us anything through Luna and 3AC and FTX and Alameda and Genesis and everything else that's happening now, is that there is like you want to have as little correlation as humanly possible. And I think we weren't valuing that highly enough before. So I think one thing is like uncorrelated, and two is de-risked. Like time matters more than anything. The ability to basically sustain in the market, the knowledge that you're building and we're building kind of our respective areas is just continuously compounding, that you need to ensure you have time. So for us, as I wrote in the memo, we have $107 million in direct cash. So that is sitting in banks. Right now, bank rates are really good, right? Even at peak craziness, like Genesis was giving you, I don't know, 8.5%, but you can get like 3.5 to 5% by just parking it in a bank right now, right? So like you really like the excess risk for everything that's imploding versus like having it in like one of the safest financial institutions is just not there anymore. Where before it used to be like you're getting 0.25% in a bank and like 10% through any of these lending desks. And so for us, it is just we have operational funds on chain. Everything else is sitting in the bank. And more now, it's obvious that like having decorrelated sort of risk and sort of how capital is held and managed matters way more than anything else. You're already underwriting the entire industry with what you're doing. So make sure you don't need to like underwrite it twice.
Seeing it from the correlation perspective is a good angle. Yeah. Already, we're developing, in this direction. So for the treasury and money management, let's have it uncorrelated. Yeah.
Definitely.
But it's still, it's a downturn, it's a bear market. In this period, what's the focus of your team currently in the bear market?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us is like we don't see that much of a difference between bull market or bear market. Like I guess in a bull market, you're more like inundated with BD and there's just like endless opportunities. So you need to be more diligent about how you prioritize and kind of what you spend your time on. But I think in the bear market, like the alternative is just like you just have less of that. But in all stages of running a company, right, the real like superpower you're supposed to have as somebody leading the company is ability to like prioritize all of the potential things you could do. There's a million feature requests, there's a million products you could put out, there's a million things you could chase after, and it's always just about prioritizing those. So for us, like during this period, is really like it's really business as usual for the most part. But I think the nice part will be like a lot of us, myself included, spends a lot of our time on BD and partnership and strategy and fundraising and all these other things. Like now I get to just sit and do the things that I love the most, which is like building product, right? And just like sitting down and thinking strategically about like what needs to be built and how it is and like how this actually gets integrated at every layer within the industry. And so, for us, I'm looking forward to it as like the best 6 to 12 months to just like really just build, which is something I miss.
Hey, that's a great way to put it, right? In a bear market is the best time to build, because there's just less distractions. Yeah. I mean, for a real builder, this is a good time. We actually feel the same thing. I mean, now the team is very focused in building the next version of product. In building some of the fundamental community stuff, rather than doing a lot of, I would say, low ROI stuff. Yeah, and then we also got some community questions. So one of them, I think it's a little bit of I would say a little bit far-fetching, but we want to understand your views. Let's say LayerZero will still be around in 2050. Yeah, that I hope we're gonna see 10 bull markets from now to then. What would you imagine LayerZero to be? And what do you think the overall Web3 industry would look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so my background originally, and both of my co-founders came from networking, right? So we all came up in a networking lab working on IEEE testing and conformance. And so I saw and spent a bunch of time on early internet technologies of voice over IP as it was developing, right? Ryan was data center bridging, Caleb was DSL. We saw how these technologies evolved and were built. And I think the best case for LayerZero, even on a scale of 5 to 10 years, is honestly that nobody has ever heard of us or thinks about us, right? When you build a web app today, right, your average developer who goes and just wants to launch an application, they don't think about how Ethernet is structured or how TCP/IP is. They don't think about the OSI stack, and they don't need to. And that's really important, right? You need to be able to abstract some of that underlying technology and infrastructure away from the average developer to make it accessible. It doesn't mean that you can't touch it, and it doesn't mean that it's not there, but it just means it's so ubiquitous that it's already been built on multiple layers of abstraction away. It underlies everything. And I think that is the end goal. And I think a lot of things in kind of Web3 as a whole will move in that direction, right? You will have, you can imagine a world where MetaMask, where you own your keys, but you no longer need to think about connecting to a certain RPC, or you no longer need to think about what underlying chain you're on. There's the ability to do all of this with almost pure abstractionism. So I hope that the goal is, by that point, is that the core technology underlies kind of the principles of what everybody was drawn to early around in this, self-sovereignty and censorship resistance and permissionlessness, and everything that makes the technology super interesting, but that the end consumer doesn't need to necessarily fully grasp. Again, anybody can do that, but the average consumer doesn't need to do that. And I think that is the big shift that I hope to see, is that, again, that this underlies everything, but not necessarily forces itself on the average consumer.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's one of the biggest pain points these days for the whole Web3 industry, right? As the user experience, honestly, has a big room for further development. Think about MetaMask has somewhere between 20 to 30 monthly active users. It's just, well, monthly active accounts, right? So that's just way too small. Yeah, I think in the next couple of years that's going to grow tenfolds, 100-folds. Yeah, and then by the year 2050, I think everyone live on this planet will start their day with some access on Web3. I don't know what the format will be at that time. Maybe Web4 or Web5 if someone later invented a blockchain of blockchain. Yeah, or but
hard to predict, but
hard to predict. Like you said, yeah. But by looking at technology development in the past, how this thing evolved, new things just come out without people's prediction. So it's hard to predict, but we are all here and keep building. Yeah, Bryan. Thanks for your time today. We learned a lot of insights from you, and then we're going to share this with the community. And we hope all the best for LayerZero and your team. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, I think there's lots. Hopefully, we'll be spending a lot of time together. There's lots of cool things that we can do together. So looking forward to exploring them.
Yeah, look forward to this.
Thanks for listening to the FutureX podcast. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you're listening to this episode.